I told you I was gonna start doing videos about Pac. This is Pac against the government. You know, it's basically him against the world. And this is how Pac really felt. But this is documentaries like news of Pac's story, his life, and how he got shot. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of speculations, a lot of lies, a lot of conspiracies, a lot of theories that comes within Tupac's, you know what I'm saying, murder and death. But Tupac said this country was built on gangs. I think this country is still run on gangs, Republicans, Democrats, the police department, the FBI, the CIA. Those are gangs. The correctional officers. I had a correctional officer tell me we're the biggest gang in New York State, Tupac Shakur. You know what I'm saying? So basically, that correctional officer wasn't bullshitting. Told Pac straight up how it really was. And this is Pac again. When will I finally get to rest through this suppression? They punish the people that's asking questions and those that possess, steal from the ones without possessions. The message I stress, to make it stop, study your lessons. Don't settle for less. Even a genius asks questions. Be grateful for blessings. Don't ever change. Keep your essence. The power is the people, and politics we address. And he is so right. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has questions. Everybody wants to know why the government is so oppressed, to making us suffer, to making us be, you know what I'm saying, so against each other and hate each other and kill each other and build gangs and put more drugs in our own communities so we can pollute our own hoods, have liquor stores in every corners in our blocks. Not only that, it's just a chaotic situation when it comes to communities, when it comes to the minorities, ghettos, hoods, and Pac always spoke about that, you understand? But they wanted to shut Pac up. Pac was too powerful. Pac was too knowledgeable, and he acknowledged the fact that if he didn't spoke and if he wasn't the voice for the ghettos, who else was going to be the voice for the ghettos and the hoods and the low minorities when they are polluting and chaotically just dismantling our, you know, our ghettos and our hoods and our communities, where everything chaotic that you can think of, you know. So Pac basically just knew he was going to be killed. And Tupac was always political. And the reason why he was always political, because Tupac always talked about the crooked government. He talked about the system. He talked about crooked cops. He talked about the crooked governments, the mayors, the senators, the White House, the presidents. He talked about everything that came into his mind, which was very political. A lot of them might say it was politically incorrect, but into Pac's minds, it was the truth. It was facts. It was what needed to be stated so the world could know what was going on and how the American government really ran their government and how they ran their countries and their states. But here we go. On November 30th, 1994, while awaiting the verdict in a trial that had become a media frenzy, Tupac Shakur was confronted by three men in the lobby of a Manhattan recording studio. These men beat Tupac, stripped $40,000 worth of jewelry from his body, and shot him 5 times. The following day, he listened from a wheelchair as a jury convicted him of first-degree sexual abuse, which was bullshit. He would eventually be sentenced to 18 months to 4.5 years in prison. When he was freed some 11 months after the shooting, he was a different, more paranoid artist, which I don't blame him. The song he released in the final years of his life seemed to collapse the resolve and occasional optimism of his earlier work into a ball of nervous energy. Tupac latching out where he once reached out. After his murder in the fall of 1996, the headlines of the New York Times arbitrarily called him a rap performer who personified violence, saying that during his final stage, his music contrary tone was gone as Mr. Shakur flaunted his success, revealing in fame and wealth. Illuminati, the 7-day theory, Tupac rapped at a breakneck pace, leaving in the numerous ticks and mistakes that the younger artist would have scrambled out of his final mixes. The agitation he felt during the final act of his life particularly sweats through the records. The frequently sounds as if he's about to fold in on himself while reserving plenty of venomous scrolls for his enemies, other rappers and industry figures, but also the elected officials targeting his communities. I told you, he spoke about all that. There was no fear in Tupac. He spoke about everything that he saw, and especially when it came to the crooked-ass government and how they were targeting the ghettos, the hoods, the low minorities. I hate that word. And the communities that were being affected by drugs and liquor stores being all over, you know what I'm saying, the hoods, and so much more, crack and all that other bullshit that comes along with the crooked government being able to place that in the hoods. And once they make millions and millions of dollars, they grab the drug dealers, they arrest them, they put them in federal penitentiaries, and they keep the money so they can build their own fucking businesses and all that. What you think, that the government is just gonna burn all the millions of dollars? That's bullshit. Tupac Shakur, Walk Me When I'm Free, and immersive art installation and archival exhibit about the rapper's life and career that is now open in downtown Los Angeles is further proof that despite conventional wisdom, the rapper's final album were as political, potent, and those that preceded them, and that they are inextricable from his lifelong ideological commitments. Shortly after you enter, you find yourself in a dark room, illuminated only by videos depicting violence against black people, often at the hands of the state. Audio from a 1992 interview with E! News, where Tupac explained why he was concerned about whether the violence and rage in his music would make white audiences uncomfortable. What about when I felt uncomfortable for 400 years? Wow. It's laid on top of this footage. At points, the room is difficult to bear. The gamble Wake Me takes by placing it at the exhibits, beginning in the Tupac's reputation as an activist, and to some, a revolutionary will have enough gravity to justify the use of such horrifying images as it walks through. Man, Pac had a way with words. He had a way with explaining and, just getting the words out. The way he touched people and impacted people by the way that he spoke. He spoke from his heart. He spoke from his soul. He wasn't afraid to just let out everything that he really felt. And the government knew that he was dangerous and powerful with his words. That's why they wanted to silence Tupac as well. Such horrifying images as it walks through Tupac's life, from his mother's incarceration to his own, from his early collision building raps to his later nearly misanthropic ones. Wake Me traces a few constants: a desire for black Americans to be meaningfully liberated, a skepticism that the government would do anything but sabotage efforts towards the end. And a belief that the art could be meaningful tools in that fight whenever reportage or pure characteristics. So basically, you know what I'm saying? Every time Tupac spoke about that in any type of shape, way, or form, they knew that the reportage was going to be, to them, catastrophic, but to Tupac, it was straight from the heart and soul. And he knew that people were going to listen, and he knew that the government was going to be pitched right in and listening to every word and every aspect of every meaning and definition that Tupac spoke bad about the government. So they knew to pay attention, because when Tupac rapped a song about the government knew that there was going to be nothing but exposure towards them. Tupac's political education began in the womb, in his mother's womb. His mother, the political activist Afeni Shakur, named her son after an Incan ruler who tried and failed to stave off Spanish colonial armies in Peru. By the time he was in middle school, Tupac Shakur would be hounded by FBI agents who staked out his lunchroom, plying him for information about his stepfather, who was on the 10 most wanted list for much of the 1980s. Wake Me spent significant time on Afeni and on. So you see, even when Tupac was already in his teenage years, you know what I'm saying, there was already hounding him, talking about his stepfather, which is Matulu Shakur. God bless his soul. He did almost 40 years in prison, got out, and 2 years or 3 years later, he ended up dying. And he was convicted of a crime he didn't commit. After 28 years of him being in prison, or 30 years, a judge basically said, we know that you're innocent. We're sorry that we convicted an innocent man, but they left him in there for 10 to 12 years more, knowing that he was an innocent man. And the reason why, because he was a member of the Black Panther. Sons of bitches. Okay, spent significant time on Afeni and on Tupac's childhood around the Black Panthers. One sculpture is an oversized jar of peanut butter, a reminder of the role Tupac and other Panther kids played after party meetings, swearing the substance over surfaces and doorknobs to stymie the federal agents who would come later to dust for fingerprints. In 1995, when Tupac was disposed as part of a civil suit holding he and Interscope Records responsible for the killing of a Texas state trooper by a young man who claimed songs on Tupacalypse Now inspired the act, he said that the word Black Power were like lullaby to him as a child. So they basically try to blame Tupac for his lyrics for the young man killing the state trooper in Texas, like basically saying that it was because Tupac's lyrics, and it was the message that Tupac was sending in Tupacalypse Now, which is the first album that Tupac, I think, went platinum. You know what I'm saying? Basically saying that Tupac was the one sending the wrong messages and sending brothers out there to commit crimes and commit murders, which is so bogus to say. Here we go. As a child, Tupac immersed himself in the arts, reading Shakespeare, writing poetry, acting in school plays. It's clear from the notebooks that he kept diligently throughout his life, many of which are on display as part of Wake Me, that he threw himself into music. Some of the early lyrics on display are rotely political. I sit in history, but I'm not learning anything. There's just a paragraph about slavery and Dr. King. Others show a keen sense of the way rap music might be used as a political cudgel by conservatives and governments. A page with lyrics to a song called Get the Gudge dated on 1989, actually includes a disclaimer. Composer's note: in no way in this song meant to stir up violence. While Tupac's first two albums were painted in court filings and editorials as a call to arm for potentially murderous teenagers, his writing on them fits rather neatly into the lineage of Black American art and political writing, moving between rage and systemic oppression. Sober looks at their social consequences and optimistic, relying cries, if you want to call it. It's also worth mentioning that just weeks before his debut album hit shelves, two Oakland police officers stopped Tupac for jaywalking, then allegedly beat him. He sued for $10 million. The case was settled for $43,000. And the reason why is because Tupac got tired of waiting. They just kept on making excuses and pushing it and giving continuances. And man, they beat up Tupac. They swelled up his eye, his lip. They broke his nose for just supposedly jaywalking. And that's when he was walking through California, when he decided to leave Oakland just to go to California, chilling with his boys or whatever, and they beat him down that bad. And it got to the point that Tupac just said, you know what, let me just go ahead and just take the $43,000 because he just got tired of waiting. And it also says the victorosity and raw charisma Tupac displayed on those first two albums and on screen and films like Juice, Poetic Justice, and Above the Rim sets him apart by a major way to a crossover star. But in the fall of 1993, Tupac was arrested and charged with 3 counts of sodomy and 2 counts of sexual abuse stemming from an encounter in his hotel room, which was bullshit. He left the room and she stayed in there with his homeboys, but he's the one that gets charged. That was a setup, just like they did Mike Tyson, and that's the way I fucking feel. He was also charged with illegal possession of a firearm. Wake me makes Tupac's imprisonment nearly literal, leading gas past a series of empty cells whose borders are lined with the bureaucratic buildup of incarceration. A workout routine, forms requesting a low-fat bland diet. On the opposite wall are pieces of Tupac's creative output during his 8 months behind bars. A screenplay, a thinly veiled autobiography, a successful rapper at the peak of his career, set up for a crime he didn't commit. What did I just say? And correspondence from friends and collaborators like the producer Johnny J, Tony Danza. You know who Tony Danza is, right? He used to walk in Who's the Boss. He was the one that worked in a restaurant in the 80s show. I used to love that show. And Quincy Jones, who sent him reading materials, perhaps because of the nature of his conviction. There is no attempt to frame Tupac as a political prisoner to any degree greater than the one to which all prisoners are political ones. So basically just saying, even though they know they wrongly convicted Tupac Shakur, they knew they couldn't stop Tupac from reading books and, studying and being the political, antic that he was, and the perseverance that he strived and to that success into being the political person and the offsprings of the Black Panthers that he brought to himself, and being born in that aspect, they could never stop Tupac in that type of, ordeal. But the exhibit's slyest bit of commentary comes in the following room, which is dedicated to his year recording of Death Row. In October 1995, Suge Knight posted a $1.4 million bond to get Tupac out of Clinton Correctional in exchange for his signature on a hastily handwritten contract, which he wrote on a toilet paper. Knight had a reputation for strong arming executive and artists. There's the famous and apocryphal story of him dangling Vanilla Ice off a hotel balcony to secure Ice Baby royalties. But later it would become clear that this label move was actually engineered by Interscope, whose parent company was in the midst of a merger and looking to distance itself from Tupac's controversies. So basically, Interscope, like Jimmy Iovine and others, that were trying to remove themselves from Tupac because of Tupac's controversy, his problems, his so-called, rape charges. So they didn't want nothing to do with Tupac. So that's why Suge took the acknowledgement and said, you know what? They trying to fuck him off his record deal. They don't want to give him his royalties. So you know what? Let me go ahead, because it was Snoop Dogg that told Suge Knight, yo, we should get Cuz over here, man. Tupac belongs to us. Come on, man. And Suge Knight said, you know what, Snoop? You absolutely right. So bam, they got Pac out of jail. And in the 11 months between this bond posting and his assassination, Tupac worked doggedly, cutting hundreds of songs, many of which are frenzied, based, and vengeful. The creators of Wake Me stacked dozens, perhaps hundreds of master reels from these recording sessions on top of one another, forming a giant glazed-off wall, the physical proof of his productivity during the final years of his life. The exhibit doesn't make any explicit allegations about Tupac's time on death row or the predatory nature of his contract, but this wall is positioned in such a way that makes the viewer feel even more claustrophobic than the mock prison cells. So basically, it's like Tupac wasn't really sure, and he wasn't really comfortable with the contract that the death row, persists, and basically wanted to line up to his expectations. But knowing that he was out of prison, he was coming revengeful, you know what I'm saying? Relentlessly, because Tupac was going to retire music to pursue his movie career, but when that happened to him in New York, and then the rape charge, and then him being set up, Tupac decided to come relentless. And that's when he came out with, you know what I'm saying, the albums All Eyes on Me, and so many diss track hit him up and all that good stuff. But Tupac still had a good relationship with a lot of people from the East Coast, like Redman, Method Man, Wu-Tang, and so many others. Tupac did not have beef with the whole New York, but a lot of New York people felt because he had beef with Biggie and Junior Mafia, they wanted to step in, and that's why LL Cool J and so many others like the Fugees and all them, Chino XL, Mobb Deep, they caught the hell of Tupac's wrath and madness when it came him having beef with Junior Mafia, and especially with Biggie Smalls and Mr. P. Diddy himself. But let's keep going. A viewer familiar with the song buried in these tracks would recall the frantic, nearly breathless Holla at Me or Against All Odds. Against All Odds was one of the biggest classics that Tupac had, and you know what I'm saying? Was it Me Against the World? I think so, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's Me Against the World. But it says, where Tupac theorized that his arrest was a setup, which was true, by the feds, who he believed sent his co-defendants to entrap him. They might also think of How Do You Want It, which is mostly a lighthearted sex romp, but includes jabs at Bill Clinton, Bob Dole, and even the civil rights activist C. Dolores Tucker, who was then publicly denouncing rap music, or the 7-day theory tender to live and die in LA, where in the midst of calls for unity between that city blacks and Latino populations, Tupac laments that California Governor Pete Wilson wanted to see both minority groups distorted or disputed, which means the same thing, destroyed, kill each other, or basically, you know what I'm saying, form wars against one another. All these subtly refrains Tupac later worked as protest music for a certain kind, eruptions from a man who sent the walls closing in around him. And the reason why he felt that is because Tupac know that he was going to be assassinated, he was going to be murdered. That's why Tupac came out with so many songs in a short period of time. He knew something bad was going to happen to him. It was just a matter of time. That's why he predicted his death like Bob Marley. That's why a lot of people said that Tupac had a death wish, because he always talked about death. Mostly in all his albums, that's all he talked about. But let's keep going. This is why the grisly images of that opening room feel are for peace with even his least overly political work. Not all viewers will agree. Some of the clips, I think specifically of red blood from a gunshot wound pooling on a white t-shirt, are perhaps unnecessarily graphic in a work that already relies on the implication of violence, systemic, and a quote happening just off screen. But this unsparing shock of reporters is exactly what Tupac is speaking about in voice over. It is almost certainly that kind of provocation he would lean into if he were surrounding the room himself. Like I said, Tupac knew he was going to be assassinated. He knew that a plot or some plan was going to take place. A sit down with the government or the crooked police or anyone that had any bad intentions into taking him out. That meeting that was going to take place, and it was going to happen. And just like he anticipated, just like he knew, just like he always dreamed of, it happened. And that's why Tupac is one of the greatest prophets to ever prophesize his death, because he knew it was going to happen. The shooting of Tupac Shakur, which is Tupac Shakur is shot. Actor and hip-hop recording artist Tupac Shakur is shot several times in Las Vegas, Nevada after attending a boxing match. Shakur was riding in a black BMW with Death Row Records founder Marion Suge Knight when a white Cadillac sedan pulled alongside and fired into Tupac Shakur's car. Knight was only grazed in the head, but Shakur was hit several times. He died in the hospital several days later, which was 7 days. Although Shakur's killer was never identified, some believe Orlando Anderson, a member of the Los Angeles gang Southside Crip, was responsible. Earlier in the evening, prior to the Mike Tyson Bruce Seldon heavyweight fight, Anderson had been attacked in the lobby of the MGM Grand Hotel by a group of Death Row Records, including Suge Knight. When a videotape of the attack came to light, Knight, who was out on parole at the time, had to return to prison to serve out a 9-year sentence, suspecting revenge as a motive. Shakur's mother filed suit against Anderson for her son's death, but the case was never resolved because Anderson was shot to death in May 1998 in a shootout outside a Los Angeles car wash. Shakur had been involved in a string of violent encounters before the shooting in Las Vegas. In 1993, he was convicted of assault and battery after an attack on a music video producer. The same year, a limousine driver claimed that Shakur had severely beaten him in 1995 while on trial for sexual abusing a young woman. Bullshit again. In a hotel room, Shakur was shot 5 times during an alleged robbery attempt at a New York recording studio. He was later convicted of sexual assault. Bullshit again. In 1996, he was sent to prison for violating probation and for failing to complete his mandatory community service. Before his death, Shakur was also the defendant in a couple of civil lawsuits, while Ronald Ray Howard shot a Texas state trooper to death after he killed a police officer in a sniper attack after claiming he had been geeked up by Shakur's music. So you see, they even wanted Tupac to testify on this young man killing a Texas state trooper, with a snipe gun. And Tupac was like, hold on, I ain't got nothing to do with that. Whatever inspired that man to do that, it has nothing to do with me or against me. But they still used it against Tupac, and he was forced to go to court, to be a defendant, but Tupac never cooperated, and they even engaged even more anger because he didn't want to cooperate in that case as well. You see, Tupac's life was a life and death situation, or do or die situation. You didn't know if Tupac was going to live one day or if Tupac was going to die the next day. You see, but Tupac was shot, and then, prison, and so much that he was going through that people said, well, if Tupac gets shot again, he'll make it, he'll live, because he's that strong. But what they didn't know is that Tupac already knew that he was going to be assassinated or killed. He was just waiting. And he himself knew that there was no escape, there was no running from it, there was no way that he was going to able to get away from it. He knew that it was going to happen. He just had to prepare himself for that moment, and he wasn't ready when that white Cadillac sedan pulled up and shot him up and took his life 7 days later. But that's just some of Tupac's life controversies and his problems. That's why he had a song called Troublesome, which was also a classic. Tupac's life, ever since a young age, took a wrong turn. I mean, from the time that he was growing up as a kid, from him being a teenager, from him being a young adult, from him being a man, and he died at an early age, at 25 years old. You can imagine the impact that Tupac would have had if he was still alive, or if Biggie was still alive. You understand what I'm saying? And the government and the media were the purpose of why Tupac and Biggie turned against each other. Because I'm going to tell you something. If it wasn't for the media, and if Farrakhan would have sat down with these two young brothers and talked, I believe these two brothers would have been alive. But Tupac already thinking that Biggie didn't want to tell him who shot him, because the niggas that shot Tupac were down with Biggie. That's why Tupac came so hard. And Biggie Smalls and Junior Mafia and P. Diddy and those in New York that decided to go on Biggie's side. But Tupac's story doesn't end there. It was just so much that was going on in his life. You understand what I'm saying? Even after he was pronounced dead, for years, people thought that he faked his death, that he went to, Cuba, and I'm not even going to get into that, because I might get in trouble, so I'm not even finna go there. And then how he went to Swahili and Africa, and so much other speculations, and so much other controversies and theories that this man possesses when it comes to his life story. But I'm going to keep doing more Tupac videos, and I'm going to keep bringing up these subjects, and I'm going to go deeper and deeper of what led after Tupac's death, and the theory and the saying that Tupac is still alive to this day. And I believed that for a certain amount of time. But it just came to the point that I just had to admit to the fact and say, you know what, Tupac is gone. You feel me? But there's a lot more videos that I'm going to do and to bring more perspective into his life story and everything that he did for the music, the impact that he did in the music, and how many people he impacted throughout his music, throughout his career, and everything he did in hip-hop. So please stay tuned, because this is just the beginning, just like I used to do when I first started YouTube so long ago. I mean, before even I think it was like about a year or two when YouTube started and everything. That's when I started doing Tupac videos and talking about Tupac. But I've been a fan way before even YouTube came out. Way before, when I was a kid, you feel me? But there's a whole lot more to come. So y'all go ahead and support y'all boy, and y'all comment down below. Y'all tell me when was y'all favorite Tupac moment, which is y'all favorite song, and which is the most hardest part that y'all had to deal with if you're a Tupac fan when Tupac was assassinated, and we'll go from there. There's your boy Chico Black, aka Jaloso. Y'all holler at me and tell me what it is. I'm out of here, y'all. Peace. And Tupac will forever be the greatest of all time. God bless.